All right, let's get right into it. We're going to explore something pretty amazing today. How forensic anthropologists can look at a skeleton, sometimes one that's hundreds of years old, and answer a really fundamental question about a person. Were they male or female? I mean, think about it. Imagine you're a detective, but your only evidence, your only clue, is a pile of bones. It's a huge forensic puzzle. And the very first piece you have to put in place is figuring out the biological sex of that person.
For any forensic scientist, this is one of the most critical first steps. You can think of it as the foundation for building out a whole biological profile, which is what might, eventually, lead to an actual identification.
So how do they do it? Well, they've got this whole toolkit of techniques, and it's really a science of building up evidence. It's not some magic bullet. And just like any good investigator, you always start with your most reliable tool first.
So, what is that most reliable tool in the box? Well, without a doubt, it is the pelvis. This one part of the skeleton tells an incredibly clear story, clearer than any other.
And just how clear is that story? We're talking up to 96% accuracy when a well-preserved pelvis is available. I mean, that is an astonishingly high level of confidence to get from just one bone. So you have to ask, why the pelvis? What makes it so special? Well, it all comes down to function. The female pelvis is shaped differently. It's broader with a larger outlet for one very specific reason: pregnancy and childbirth. And that's a fundamental difference you just don't see anywhere else in the skeleton. And you can literally see that functional difference in the shape of the bone. Look here at the subpubic angle. That's the arch right at the front. See how in females it's this wide U shape? That creates a bigger opening. But in males, it's a much sharper, narrower V shape.
And it's not just the angle up front. If you look at the sciatic notch on the side of the pelvis, you see the same pattern. The female notch is wide and shallow, which contributes to that overall broader structure. The male notch, on the other hand, is narrow and deep. It's all connected.
Okay, but this is where the real detective work comes in. What happens if you don't have a complete pelvis? What if it's missing or it's just too broken to read? What's the next best piece of evidence our forensic anthropologists can turn to?
Well, they turn to the skull. Now, this is the second most useful tool in the kit, but the accuracy does drop a bit. We're talking more in the range of 80 to 90%. Here, the clues are a little more subtle. It's more about general size and, well, ruggedness.
And the key concepts here are these two words: robusticity and gracility. It's kind of just a scientific way of talking about how rugged or delicate a skull looks. Generally speaking, male skulls are larger, heavier, with more pronounced bumps where muscles attach. That's robust. Female skulls tend to be smaller, lighter, and smoother. That's gracile. And this table here breaks down exactly what they're looking for. See, it's never just one thing. It's the whole picture. For example, a big, prominent brow ridge, plus square eye sockets, plus a square chin, all of those together strongly point towards a male. A smoother brow with a more pointed chin, on the other hand, suggests a female. It's all about combining the traits. But, just visually assessing something, the eyeball test, it has its limits. To make things more objective, especially when you might have to testify in court, scientists turn to cold, hard numbers. And this is where the field is getting really interesting. They call this metric analysis, and it's basically what it sounds like: taking incredibly precise measurements of the bones with calipers and then comparing those numbers to data from known populations. This is huge because it removes a lot of the subjective judgment. It makes the findings repeatable and much easier to defend. And what's really fascinating is that this data has to be specific to the population you're studying. For instance, a recent study looked at a collection of skeletons from 20th century Italy to create a brand new metric standard, because skeletal dimensions can actually vary quite a bit between different ancestral groups and even across different time periods. And the results from that study were just stunning. Using their new model, they found that a single measurement on the radius, that's one of your forearm bones, could determine sex with 96.8% accuracy. Think about that. That shows how the science is getting more and more precise, sometimes even surpassing the reliability of the pelvis if you have the right data. So we have the pelvis, we have the skull, and we have these super precise measurements. But using these tools correctly means you have to follow a strict set of rules and, just as important, you have to understand their limitations. This is really what separates real science from just guesswork. And there are official rules. Groups like the Scientific Working Group for Forensic Anthropology, or SWGANTH, they literally write the playbook. And their best practices are crucial.
They say you must use data that's specific to the person's likely ancestry and time period. You also have to look at as many features as you can, not just one. And, this one is so important, you have to do the assessment blind without knowing who police think the person might be so you can avoid any bias.
But there are some hard limits. And the biggest one? These methods are generally not reliable for children. The skeletal differences between sexes, what scientists call sexual dimorphism, they really only show up after puberty. So for a child skeleton, you usually can't make the call.
And this brings us to probably the most critical distinction of all. Forensic anthropologists are estimating biological sex based on these anatomical features we've been talking about. What they absolutely cannot determine is a person's gender. Gender is a social identity, a cultural expression. Bones tell a biological story, not a social one. That's a crucial difference.
Ultimately, it all comes back to this. Being able to read the story of sex written in a skeleton is an incredibly powerful tool. It's one of the very first, most vital steps an investigator can take on that long, difficult road to giving an unknown person their name back.
When you think about it, the skeleton is this remarkable archive of a person's entire life. We've just seen how it records sex, but it also holds clues to a person's age, their ancestry, their health, maybe even their job. So it just makes you wonder, what other secrets are our bones just waiting to tell us?